can't bring up any particular text right now. That I cannot. Then I will concede that. But I know that there is textual evidence out there. Just because I can't say it right now, I wish I was more knowledgeable on the subject. But I know for a fact that there is.
All of us are living for something or someone that none of us can prove is true. I can't prove God. I can't prove Christ. You can't prove that whatever you're living for is true.
I'm living for myself.
Yeah.
Going about everyday life.
Fine. So please prove to me that the ultimate purpose of life is to live for yourself.
What proof would I need beyond? You're saying that you would need an intelligent designer. Well, God would then be an intelligent design in that aspect. There has to be an infinite regress. Who designed God?
Nobody designed God. God is an eternal being without beginning, without end.
There's no evidence of a God.
Sure there is. Design points to a designer. Moral objectives, objective morals, moral absolutes point to a moral lawgiver.
Morals are conventional. Social contract theory. I mean, they're conventional.
Fine. Try and live it out that morality is really relative, which means whatever your opinion is on murder, child abuse, and pedophilia, the opposite is equally valid. I don't think you can live that out.
It is equally valid, but it's not accepted because of social contract theory. That's the whole thing behind it. It's not accepted by society, and we're raised around this. Not just in my lifetime, I'm only 21 years old. We're raised, the whole entire existence of the human morale has been raised around this.
Well, I'm real glad that you weren't around at the Nuremberg Trials, because the Nazi lawyers were brilliant. And the Nazi lawyers, representing the guys who had gassed Jews in Dachau and Auschwitz, said to the Allied judges, time out. All these officers, Nazi officers, did was to obey their culture, to carry out their orders. Who do you Allies think you are, coming from a different culture, from England and the United States, passing judgment on these Nazi Germans? Don't you understand? You come from a different culture. Your laws are irrelevant to Nazi Germany. And the Nuremberg Trials shut down until Robert Jackson, the American consul, stood up and said, there's a law above the law of culture, and according to this law, the gassing of Jews in Dachau and Auschwitz is absolutely wrong. And the Nuremberg Trials kicked back in. Why? Because Robert Jackson appealed to a moral law that was not relative, not culturally determined, but comes from the character of God, which is just, and that's why the Allies condemned the Nazi officers to death for the evil about Dachau and Auschwitz.
Well, why would you automatically jump to God, something being outside of this world, when you can look at a global culture? Commonly accepted morals are morals. Now, whenever people do deviate from this understood moral reasoning that we carry, just like the Nazis, they get reprimanded. Just like the Allies reprimanded the Nazis, because that is not accepted as conventional morality. Not in this global society, and it is a global society. And these morals came out of this global society.
If you can't understand the point of the Nuremberg Trials, and Robert Jackson's point of appealing to a law above the law, and I can promise you, sir, he wasn't appealing to the United Nations or the League of Nations or some nebulous...
Who was he appealing to, God?
He was appealing to an intangible value of justice that the Nazis violated when they gassed Jews. And he was appealing, obviously, to a law of justice that comes from the character of God. That's an eternal value. It wasn't thought up by people, by culture, by the world.
Well, I was raised Roman Catholic, so I'm aware of the stories. But just because it is written does not mean it is true. L. Ron Hubbard created the Church of Scientology. That is ridiculous. It's science fiction. It's an imaginary friend. Just because it's written does not mean it is true.
Correct.
Who wrote this? This was written 2,000 years ago.
Okay, great question.
A little less than 2,000 years ago, but still,
right.
How could we hold any validation by this text?
You
There's
bet.
a lot of text that has been thrown out, a lot of text that contradicts the text of the Bible. How could you just believe in it just because it's written? That doesn't.
No.
That's not a logical argument.
Very good point. I have tests that I use on any document that claims to be historically accurate. My tests are 4 in number. Internal consistency, meaning by that are there contradictions in the text to point to massive confusion on the part of the authors. Second test, literary style. Is it once upon a time in the land of Nod, Wynken, Blinken, and Nod took a boat ride? That's obviously fairy tale. Or does it read like the New York Times or the LA Times? At this time, in this place, with these people around, Jesus said this and did that. That's how the Gospels read. Historical narrative, not fairy tale. Third test, archaeology. Was Jesus born on the island of Atlantis? Did he run around with Mickey Mouse, Elmer Fudd, and his cronies? No. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, grew up in Nazareth, hung around with Matthew, Mark,
And
John.
he walked on water and was raised from the dead. It's just as Mickey Mouse to me as, anything
That's
else.
because you philosophically don't allow for a supernatural God. And if there is a supernatural God, a miracle is not irrational. A miracle is simply the supernatural God changing a natural law he created in the first place. But if you're so narrow-minded that you don't allow for the possibility of a supernatural God, then obviously miracles don't happen. That's obvious. We agree. Whenever my first test is internal consistency, my second test is literary style, my third test is archaeological evidence, and my fourth test is manuscript evidence. The New Testament today is based on over 5,200 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the 2nd through the 10th century AD, found from Rome, Italy, down around the Mediterranean to Alexandria, Egypt, all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree. There is no document from antiquity that can even approach the New Testament in manuscript evidence. 20 manuscripts for Aristotle. 20 manuscripts for Herodotus' works. 20 manuscripts for Tacitus and Thucydides. For the New Testament, over 5,200. It's incredible the manuscript wealth we have for the New Testament.
The amount of a manuscript does not constitute it as being true. Anybody could write anything.
Good. What are the tests that you use to determine historical reliability? I just given you my 4 tests that I use to determine historical reliability.
Well, here's the thing. How can you scientifically prove that God exists?
Sir, you can't scientifically prove that Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. It's called historical knowledge. You don't get Abraham Lincoln back onto this campus every September and have John Wilkes Booth shoot him so you can scientifically prove it happened. That's not possible. Historical knowledge is not based on the repeatability of something. It's based on the trustworthiness of eyewitness testimony.
Okay, then what about the historical knowledge of more primitive religious beliefs?
I can promise you, sir, Muhammad lived. Right?
Well, yeah, I'm sure he did live.
Right.
I believe that Jesus lived as a person. Doesn't mean that I believe he resurrected and his body went up to the skies.
Well, why do you believe Jesus lived?
Because of historical documentation that he lived.
Good. Great.
Okay.
And what's the historical documentation that he lived? What's the stuff you've read that convinces you that he lived?
Well, I've read the Bible. I have read it.
Okay.
Can't wrap my mind behind him going up to the skies, to the heavens.
So you do believe that historical knowledge is legitimate. It doesn't have to be scientifically proved.
Okay, yes.
Right? You believe in historical knowledge. Now, those historical documents that record how Jesus lived and what he taught and how he died also record how he rose from the dead. Why don't you believe that those same historical documents that record his life, teachings, and death are accurate when they talk about his resurrection? Why?
Well, other people say that he did not resurrect and he did not create all these miracles.
Right.
Just as much as you could say, well, the textual evidence supports it, there's textual evidence that does not support it.
No, there's no textual evidence that does not support his resurrection in the New Testament.
Not in the New Testament. Yeah, step outside of the Testament.
Good. So what's the document that you appeal to that gives solid evidence that Jesus did not rise from the dead?
I can't bring up any particular text right now. That
right.
I cannot. Then I will concede that. But I know that there is textual evidence out there. Just because I can't say it right now, I wish I was more knowledgeable on the subject. But I know for a fact that there is.
All of us are living for something or someone that none of us can prove is true. I can't prove God. I can't prove Christ. You can't prove that whatever you're living for is true.
I'm living for myself.
Yeah.
Going about everyday life.
Fine. So please prove to me that the ultimate purpose of life is to live for yourself.
What proof would I need beyond it's my comfort? As long as everything's in order, my family's fine, I eat, I'm comfortable, that's all that matters. So,
okay, good. So please prove to me that the ultimate purpose of life is to have my family live a comfortable life and for me to live a comfortable life.
I just did, because that's how I live my life.
And that's the proof?
Well, you said that your proof was based off of your life experience earlier.
No, I did not.
Yeah, no.
I did not. I did not say believe in Jesus because I believe in Jesus. I never once said believe in Jesus because I believe in him.
No.
In fact, I think you'd be an idiot to believe in Jesus because I believe in Jesus.
No.
Instead, I've said believe in Jesus because the historical evidence of the way he lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead points to his credibility.
I didn't say that you were impressing your belief on me through that. Maybe that's the way you took from what I said. But what I was saying is that earlier you did mention, I believe in Jesus because of my life and not because of my assumptions, because of my experience of life. You interpret your experiences of life, and that's your interpretation. I interpret mine. Doesn't mean that you're true or that you're more right than I am. If I interpret that my life is lived the way I want it and I don't believe in God, you saying, well, my experiences have led me to believe in God, that doesn't hold any weight.
That's not my argument. I have never
said,
once said.
No, you stated that earlier.
I know, but you got to think carefully and listen to what I said. I said my experience of reality is that every moral relativist that I have met cannot live out their moral relativism, because to live out moral relativism means whatever you think about murder, child abuse, pedophilia, the opposite is equally true, because it's all relative. You can't live that out, I don't think. Now, if I'm wrong, please tell me. Please tell me. I think murder, pedophilia, and child abuse is wrong, but I realize that if someone chooses to murder, to abuse children, and to rape little boys, it's okay. Not for me, but it's okay. It's okay for them, and it's okay because it's all relative. So you can't live that out. Neither can I.
People live that out every day, though. If you don't
no, they do not.
Look, if I don't agree with it,
no, they do not.
If I don't agree with it, I'm not going to do it. But if somebody else does, child molesters, they think it's all right, they do it. I don't think it's all right, so I don't do it.
But if you're a moral relativist, you have to acknowledge when they do it, they're not doing anything evil.
For them, it's all right.
For them, it's all right, and in reality, it's all right. Because reality is relative. That's what you believe. And my point to you is, you can't live that out consistently. You have to be an intellectual hypocrite. You have to break down at some point and say to the murderer, you should not have murdered her. You should not. And when you use the word should, you're breaking with your moral relativism. And you're saying, there's a real value. Do not murder. You just violated it. You're wrong.
Religions get brought up, but I grew up Hindu my whole life.
Right.
I'm religious,
right.
And I've heard of Jesus Christ. I have read some of the Bible, yet I refuse to accept him as the Son of God. But I believe his teachings, there's a lot to be learned from. Now, yesterday you brought up free will. In the Christian faith, free will is two choices. Either I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, or I do not. Now, in the Hindu concept of free will, I can do whatever I want. I can live my entire life the way I want to, and there's not just two options, there's a million options. So is my definition of free will not better? And
Sir, I can promise you, my definition of free will is not that there are only two options. Obviously, there are a whole slew of options.
Well, what's the other
So
option?
whoever communicated to you that a Christian thinks that free will is defined by two options, they're wrong.
What is the other option other than I either accept Jesus Christ after I've heard of him, or I do not? What is my third option
When you
there?
say you do not, there are a slew of options. You can be a materialist, a hedonist, a narcissist, a Hindu, a Jew, a Muslim, an atheist, an agnostic, a narcissist. Free will doesn't mean they're just two options.
No, but every single one of those people can go to heaven if they do not accept Jesus Christ. I do not accept Jesus Christ.
Do you believe in heaven?
I believe in nirvana.
Nirvana, thank you. So study nirvana and study heaven, and you'll notice that there's a real difference between the two.
There is. Heaven takes one try. Nirvana takes many tries.
No, sir.
Yes. The concept of reincarnation exists because nirvana takes more than one lifetime to achieve.
Yeah. But let's examine that.
All right.
Nirvana is the result of working off your bad karma. Self-effort.
Karma.
Heaven, according to Jesus Christ, is a result of God's grace. It's a free gift. It's not a result of working at it. You can't work at it according to Christ.
But
You're a sinner.
I'm sorry. You have to have experiences. In Hinduism, we believe in reincarnation. I was born a Brahmin. That is the highest caste. Now I have to live through. Maybe I've lived through all the castes. Maybe I haven't.
Yeah.
But if I don't have all these experiences, how can I say that I'm worthy of nirvana or heaven at all?
Okay, sir, but they're qualitatively different.
Yes, but why is one life? But my soul does not change. That's the argument. My body, my physical appearance, my family, my influences change. But my
Right.
soul is always learning.
Good.
And does that not seem just a bit more practical than one shot? You have one life, go at it.
You bet. You got one life according to Christ. That's exactly right. Well, sir,
Why? Why is reincarnation this absurd idea then?
Because I have zero evidence that I lived a previous existence.
You have zero evidence that Mary could be born without sperm. Whoa there.
A supernatural
Jesus
God,
could be born
a
without-
supernatural God can perform a miracle.
And then
I have
reincarnation is supernatural.
no memory of a previous existence. None of my friends have a memory of a previous existence.
You're not meant to. Your soul is. That is the post-death.
But then what's the evidence that we all had previous lives?
Give me evidence for Yahweh. I
That's
will
what
give you.
I've
I
been
will
doing
give you evidence for my
Design
elephant-headed
points
God.
to a designer. Objective morals point to a moral lawgiver.
Okay.
Life points to a giver of life, not giver of from non-life. The rational mind points to a rational creator, not to the irrational. The beginning of the universe points to a cause,
Okay.
an uncaused cause. The existence of love points to reality being greater than matter and energy. They're intangible values like love. They're very real, very big part of our lives. If love is real, there's got to be a God who creates love, because if there is no God, love is just matter and energy evolved to a higher order.
But if that is so intangible, then why are the 10 Commandments things that you can specifically do in the tangible world? Why am I judged intangibly for something I do that is tangible? In Hinduism, I live on this earth. Everybody is God. Everybody here to me is a God.
Okay, good.
And they have the right to judge me.
Fine.
Here.
All right. If everybody's God,
Yes.
that means he's part of God and I'm part of God,
Yes,
right?
you are.
Good. Great. Pam, what just happened?
That is the wrong approach.
What do you mean? I'm part of God and he's part of God. Now, what just happened here? What's wrong with that?
Do you treat God that way?
Yeah, I
When you
just
walk
did.
into- when
Bam.
you walk into a church, would you punch a
What
priest?
is wrong with what I just did? If I believe
Yes.
that he's part of God and I'm part of God, if I smack him in the face, part of God just hit part of God. So why is that wrong?
You have done something that is absolutely wrong. You are not
How?
part of God.
How can that be absolutely wrong if what you say is true, that I'm part of God? If I'm part of God and he's part of God and I smack him in the face, that's part of God hitting part of God. So why is that wrong?
Would you hit everybody?
If you want me to, sure. Bam, bam,
Alright.
bam. I'll go around hitting everybody.
And you're well on your way to nirvana. Because that's the point.
No, but you said I'm part of God.
Yes, you are.
All right,
You
if
have to
I'm
discover
part
that.
of God,
You have to discover the self.
then what is wrong with me hitting him?
Nothing, as long as you hit everybody else.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That is why I don't buy your worldview. Because your worldview wipes out the basis for an understanding of justice.
No, society creates justice, but okay.
All right, society does. Fine, it's all relative then.
Okay.
But you see, one of the reasons that I am a follower of Jesus Christ and not a follower of the avatars is because of justice. Gandhi got his understanding that the caste system was wrong, not right. Gandhi got his understanding that the caste system was wrong, not from the Vedas and Upanishads, which teach exactly what you just said. Everything's part of God. You see, if everything's part of God, then there's no difference between good and evil. It's all part of God. You see, the only way you know what the difference between good and evil is, because we ain't all part of God. We're all creatures of God, but we have a free will, and we can do evil or we can do good. And Gandhi saw the caste system is evil. Stop it, and I will fight to stop it.
The caste system is something that religion did not establish. Society established that religion was
Fine,
was
whatever.
used to make people afraid so they would become part
Okay.
of it. Now, you're talking about absolute evils and absolute wrongs.
Yeah.
Yesterday you said murder was absolutely wrong because of God. Then is it not absolutely wrong to condemn my soul? And
No.
If my religion allows you to achieve nirvana, if my religion allows every non-Christian and Christian here to achieve nirvana, but yours doesn't, then how am I just not the better person, and how am I not absolutely right? Because you are saying there's a difference in right and wrong, and you have this wonderful definition of right. The Christian faith has a great definition of right, doing good. Now that's a very basic way of putting it, but that's just what it is, doing good. And but I allow for more people to do good than you do.
No, I allow everybody to do good. The question is, what does God say about eternity? And according to Jesus Christ, God says, if you want to live together with God, you'll spend eternity with God in heaven. If you want to live your life separate from God, He's not going to violate your free will. He will grant your request, and you'll spend eternity separate from Him. Why? Because He respects your decision. Cynicism is parasitic. A cynic just breeds off of the beliefs of others. See, sir, when you and I put our heads on our pillows tonight, we both have to answer the question, what am I living for? And what's the evidence that what I'm living for is true? And I can promise you, living for Jesus Christ has far more evidence to support than any of the options I've ever known. Robert Coles, professor of psychology at Harvard University, pointed out, quote, all the teachings on ethics over the past 2,000 years are simply footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount. You read the Sermon on the Mount, there is ethical brilliance. Brilliance. That demands respect. I watch him die on a cross. And as he dies, instead of cursing his enemies the way I would have, he prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And wow, my respect just goes up even higher. Most importantly, 3 days after he dies, he physically bodily rises from the dead, and over a period of 40 days, he appears to over 500 people who see him risen from the dead. And sir, now it's a no-brainer. If the dude was really dead, and he really rose from the dead, to trust him, it's a no-brainer. You got to. So that's why I trusted it.
Okay, so you came to that logical conclusion because that seemed right to you, and all of the other arguments didn't match up to it, right? So I was brought up as a Christian, so that's the only thing that I've been taught. So I find it hard to identify myself as a Christian when I haven't heard all of the other arguments as well. So what do you say to someone that claims to be a Christian without having heard all of those other arguments?
Yep. A great point. All right. Here's often what people say to me. Cliff, you haven't studied every option. Therefore, for you to think that Jesus is the truth is really narrow-minded, arrogant, very bigoted. Guess what? It is absolutely impossible for any one of us to honestly explore every single option that exists. You see, so that statement that people make to me, which used to knock me off balance, I used to think, whoa, maybe there's something to that. Maybe the fact that I haven't studied every single philosophy, every single tribal religion, maybe that means that I have no basis for really trusting in Christ. And so I used to think, whoa, Cliff, maybe that is right. But the more I began to think about it, and the more I began to observe the people who made those statements, the more I began to realize what is really behind that statement is an incredible cynicism towards the pursuit of truth. It's an incredible laziness, and it's a statement that's showing a laziness in pursuing truth. I disagree that in order for you to know something, you have to have explored every single option that exists. That's false. That is really false. You don't have to explore every option in order to come to an understanding of what's true. Now, when you're confronted by more options, I hope you're going to be open-minded. I hope I'm going to be open-minded. And someone comes up to me and says, you know something, Cliff? I used to believe in Jesus, but now I've found something better. Well, if I don't listen to him, I'm a narrow-minded bigot. I'd better sit down and say, okay, give it to me. I want to pursue truth. I want to understand what's real. And if there's someone or something that is more reliable than Jesus Christ, I need to hear about it. Now, fortunately, I'm in a line of work where I have to do that on a regular basis. I speak on university campuses around the United States, so I have no choice, guys, but on a regular basis to be challenged. Let me give you one quick example. Come on, Cliff. The resurrection of Jesus Christ was just borrowed from Egyptian religion. Okay, fine. So I got to go back and do my homework and find out. Osiris. Did Osiris really rise from the dead? And when you study Egyptian mythology, what you find out is Osiris was killed. He was chopped up into 14 pieces. His sister Isis goes searching for the 14 pieces. She finds 13, puts the 13 back together, and so Osiris comes back to life, but he's in the underworld, and he's Lord of the underworld. And so what I immediately realize is, wait a second. This is the only account of a resurrection before the resurrection of Christ. But it's not a physical resurrection. It's a resurrection of this mythological being with an animal's head, and he just comes back with 13 of his 14 parts. He's missing a part, and it's not a physical resurrection. It's a resurrection into the underworld. Well, that's radically different from the historical resurrection of Jesus Christ, who physically dies on a cross, is buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, and 3 days later is raised from the dead, and over a period of 40 days appears to over 500 people who see him risen from the dead. Now, there is a God that I find very attractive. It's the God who's worshipped in the town I grew up in Fairfield County, Connecticut. And I live in New Canaan, Connecticut. And that God is money. If you want to understand the worship of the God of money, just read Ayn Rand. Atlas Shrugged. Ayn Rand does a tremendous job pointing out how the pursuit of money is God. All right, so that's the environment I grew up in. Fairfield County, Connecticut. The successful people in my neighborhood work on Wall Street, and they do well. Goldman Sachs pays them well. So does JP Morgan. All right, now I've got to ask myself, does the evidence point to this God of money being really true, reliable, credible? And guys, you don't have to be a psychology major to examine what happens when you make money God in your life. It leads to an emptiness, a hollowness. Yes, does it lead to perks? Of course it does. Large stock portfolios are very nice in many ways. But if you build your life on that, you are building your life on sand. And all you got to do is think a little bit about it, and you begin to realize it. So, those are the two gods that are alternatives to Jesus Christ that I have most recently been confronted by.
Okay, so as a pastor, do you preach? You probably most likely preach Christianity strictly, and then do you also try to work in why some of the other ones are wrong? Because I think that's very helpful for me to understand why not just mine is right, but why some of the other ones are wrong.
I get a little bit close to it, but you know, my attitude is I don't want to focus on the counterfeits. I want to focus on the real thing. It's hard enough for me to get to know God because I can't see God and I can't audibly hear God's voice. So it's hard enough for me to get to know God. So I don't take too much time looking at the counterfeits. But when someone comes to me and says, I really find this attractive, then I got to be open and study it. And if I conclude it's true, then I'll embrace it. But if it's counterfeit, I want to point out it's counterfeit. And I think if you worship money and follow the philosophy of Ayn Rand, you're in for a very empty life. Will there be perks? Will you enjoy power? Will you enjoy your BMW and Mercedes and great vacations? Of course you will. And yacht, etc. You'll enjoy all of that. But I'm convinced that Christ was spot on when he points out the real purpose in life is relationship.
Let's go there.
All-time favorite. Right?
So the verse about man shall not lie with a man.
Yep.
And before that it's something about two fabrics being sewn together, and after that it's about meat being boiled in a pot.
Yep.
So I don't know what your views are on homosexuality, so I'm curious about that, and then I'd like you to maybe touch on those verses and what it means. To take that one verse literally, but maybe the other ones in Leviticus not literally.
Okay, good. If the only scriptural passages about homosexuality were in Leviticus 18 and 20, to try and argue that homosexuality was a sin would be pretty difficult. Okay? So let's be real upfront about that. Why am I convinced that homosexuality is sinful? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
Okay. First point. I have to apologize to homosexuals for the way they've been viewed as dirt by, quote, Christians, unquote. That is false. The Bible bends over backwards, Jesus bent over backwards to point out that all human beings have equal value. Why? Because we all are created in the image of God. And if anybody thinks that a person's value depends upon their sexual preference, I am convinced they're wrong. If your sexual preference is to have sex with an animal, that doesn't change the fact that you're a human being created in the image of God, right, with equal value of everybody. So the whole idea that a Christian thinks that someone's value depends upon their sexual preference is so crazy, it's embarrassing. So I have to apologize to my homosexual friends for the way they've been viewed as inferior dirt by, quote, Christians, unquote. That's false. It's a contradiction of what Christ taught. Second point. In the same way that life has a purpose, in the same way that life is not meaningless, in the same way that God created us for the purpose of loving and worshiping Him and loving and serving each other, so our sexuality is not meaningless. There's a purpose. And the most positive statement about that purpose is found right in the creation mandate, long before Leviticus. Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, we read, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." Not one man and many women. That's why Solomon was out to lunch when he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Not good. That's why David, a man after God's own heart, not good when he had several wives and several concubines. Not good, David. God's good creation was one man, one woman, within the context of a lifelong commitment. That's Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. Then, you've got Romans chapter 1, you've got 1 Corinthians chapter 6, you've got 1 Timothy chapter 1, where it's rather clear that for a man to lie with a man and have sex with a man, or a woman to lie with a woman and have sex with a woman, is communicated as being against the purpose for which God created our sexuality. Yeah, Cliff, my lesbian friends and homosexual friends say to me, don't you realize, though, that when you say that, and when the Bible says that, that attacks our identity, and I don't appreciate that. Wait a second. What I hear you saying is, because you were born with a homosexual drive, that's who you are, and that's your identity. I disagree. Just because you're born with a drive does not make it good. I'm a heterosexual male. Do you think that my heterosexual drive is to have sex with just one woman? Thank you for smiling. No. I would like to have sex with many different beautiful women. The question, though, for me as a heterosexual male is, has God created my sexuality for a purpose? And if so, what is that purpose? Just because I'm born with a drive doesn't make it right. And we're all born with mixed up drives. Let me give you one example out of my life. 9-year-old Cliff goes following mom out the supermarket line. I had never seen this behavior modeled. I reached out as I'm walking out, grabbed the candy bar, stuffed it into my pocket, and kept right on walking. I am a natural born thief. Doesn't make it right. It comes to me naturally. See, that's why I've got to think and ask myself, what's the purpose for which God made me? What's the purpose of my sexuality? What's the purpose of my ability to make money? It's a good ability to make money. You better learn to make money. You better provide for yourself. That's a gift from God. And you better enjoy sex, but you got to ask yourself, what's the purpose that God gave me this gift? That's how I think it through.
So we come back to the relationships, and these relationships are the purpose that we're here in. It's why God has created us. Mm-hmm. And for a gay man or a lesbian, they find the most passionate, sweet love, support, everything from a relationship with the same sex.
Yep.
Okay. And then in Jeremiah, it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord.
Yep.
They are for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and hope."
Yep.
So if God knows these plans,
right,
and this is what feels right and feels natural, and this is where they get the love, and this is where they maybe even feel God, is with this person, how can it be a sin?
Because we're born mixed up kids. Because I am a Jekyll and Hyde. And guess what? So are you. Just look inside yourself. You have tremendous desires to do good. Every single atheist, every single agnostic, every single Christian has tremendous desires to do good, but we also have tremendous desires to do evil.
So, on like that, if there was such thing as a hierarchy of sins,
right.
Are you saying that basically all these are just sins, and then we make our own decisions to then follow God and not sin?
Well, the amazing message of Jesus Christ is that God is generous, God is gracious, and God wants to not just forgive me for my sin, but He also wants to give me the grace to change and to become the beautiful person that God initially wants me to be, and He initially created me to be. See, how do you view human beings? I would insist all human beings having innate, intrinsic value. Why? Because we're all created in the image of God. But I would also insist that image has been horribly defaced. Let me give you one quick example. I have 3 precious sons. I just love the living daylights out of them. They're the greatest. That's a father's prejudice speaking there. Now, when my second son was about 3 years old, or 4, he sat in his chair and I put a glass of grape juice in front of him. And I said, "Son, don't knock the grape juice onto the carpet." With a smile from this ear to that ear, he backhanded that glass of grape juice all over the carpet. My son is a sinner, just like his old man. He was born that way. He was also born with amazing value. But he was born marred, defaced image of God. What Dallas Willard, the philosophy professor at USC, calls a readiness to sin factor. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, that great Russian novelist, as he lay on a bed of straw in a prison camp in Siberia, came to the understanding, quote, "The line separating good from evil does not run between parties and classes and countries. You know, the Republicans are the good guys and the Democrats are the bad guys, or vice versa. Or the capitalists are the good guys and the socialists are the bad guys. No. Alexander Solzhenitsyn understood the line separating good from evil runs through every human heart. And when Solzhenitsyn understood that, he realized, I need a savior. And he converted to Jesus Christ. That's good thinking. I agree with Solzhenitsyn.
Okay. Just one more thing. So with the idea that homosexuality is a sin, and as like if you were a little boy and you were able to learn that you can't steal candy bars because that's wrong.
Right.
Do you think that people who practice homosexuality need to learn to not practice that or to de-identify with that because it's a sin?
I have